with Senator Pia Cayetano as the main sponsor, and the September 25, 2024 clean copy of the bill as the working draft with Senator Gatchalian as the interpolator. I move that they be recognized, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved. Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I propose to the good sponsor to just park Section 22 for now? We gave our proposals. However, there are still some discussions whether to accept or how to tweak that proposal, Mr. President. And I have succeeding proposals on Section 22 as well. And admittedly, Section 22 is the core of this bill, the meat of this bill, Mr. President. So if a good sponsor will allow, we can park this for now so that we can think about it. We can also come up with compromises and counter proposals, Mr. President.
Mr. President, earlier before we suspended, we regretfully delivered our response that we were rejecting the amendment of His Honor. But of course, in the interest of still finding a compromise, we had a fairly lengthy discussion. And unfortunately, Mr. President, as His Honor knows, this is the heart and soul of the bill. And this representation has made lengthy explanation, including the chart that we showed on the screen about how for the past 14 years, the price of indigenous natural gas has been extremely competitive. It has mostly been on the low side. We reiterated the provisions that are currently in the bill, and it is our position that this is necessary because we want to really promote indigenous natural gas, and the only way we can do that is to really ensure that when we develop the industry, there will be buyers for indigenous natural gas. And this is not a scenario, this is not something we're inventing. Aggregation is very common in many countries, and doing this is really the answer to our ensuring energy security for the country, Mr. President. So that is our position. If His Honor at the end of all this still has additional proposal, it is my duty to always listen to my colleagues, but for now, this is the response, and we are rejecting that proposal, unfortunately.
Thank you for the reply, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I heard the arguments of the good sponsor, Mr. President, and if she will allow, we can table this for now, the entire Section 22, and I will submit to her. Actually, I've already submitted to her our proposal, but we can also submit some counter proposals, and just to give us some time to think, Mr. President, and also not to belabor the point, Mr. President.
Are we going to deliberate it after all the
Well, as far as this representation is concerned, there is no counter proposal coming from us. It has already been rejected. So if His Honor wants to work on it, of course, I will entertain, but I've officially rejected the amendment already, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, if that is the case, Mr. President, unfortunately, I am of the opinion that this is a very important proposal to make sure that we can deliver the lowest price to our consumers. Mr. President, we took a look at, personally, I took a look at the entire repercussions of this proposal, Mr. President, and this provision will impact our consumers directly. So we thought about this, and we carefully analyzed the provision in this bill, Mr. President. Unfortunately, our proposal is to have transparency from the onset so that we can assure our consumers, we can tell them that they will get the lowest price possible, Mr. President.
Well, just to respond, but I've already pointed it out, the word transparent is very clear in the opening sentence of this section. So in terms of assuring customers of transparency, nandiyan na po yun. And anyway, I think I've belabored the point, Mr. President. I'd like to move on.
Mr. President, so we can, if the good sponsor will allow, I have succeeding amendments, Mr. President, that is related to the first amendment so that we can clearly see the entire picture. May I propose that amendment? And if the good sponsor still feels that that amendment is unacceptable, then we can vote on the entire amendment, Mr. President, because it's all interconnected so that I will not make one amendment after the other, if the good sponsor will allow that.
May I know from the sponsor what page did we finish your last amendment?
My last amendment, Mr. President, is on page 21. I think that's the last one I read. Page 21, the last one I read, which was already approved.
Mr. President, my amendment is on page 19,
So
line
this is an
18.
Anterior amendment.
Anterior amendment, Mr. President.
All right, please proceed.
Mr. President, I'll read my other amendments because it's all interconnected. And we can decide on that later on. On page 19, in the same line 18, delete the phrase over imported natural gas. On the same page, in line 20, after the word supply, delete the word administrative. On the same page, in line 21, delete the phrase or any other arrangement allowed by DOE. On the same page, delete the paragraphs from lines 22 to 25. And on page 20, these are all interrelated, Mr. President. On page 20, on page 20, line 2, before the word indigenous, insert the phrase power from. On the same page, line 2, replace the phrase in the generation, transmission, distribution, and supply of power with the phrase over power from the other conventional energy sources whenever the price of power from indigenous gas is equal to or lower than power from conventional energy sources. And on the same page, in lines 4 to 7, delete the phrase, this includes requiring electricity suppliers to source a portion of their energy supply from power plants that use indigenous natural gas and determining the appropriate minimum percentage of the power generation mix that should be supplied by natural gas power plants that use indigenous natural gas. So those are my amendments, Mr. President, on Section 22, Mr. President. And it's all interconnected, Mr. President.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. We reject those amendments. The provision that we have approved is the provision that is acceptable to this committee, and unfortunately, NDOE, in consistent with our objective of pursuing energy security and the best prices for the consumers, Mr. President. We feel that the provision we have is sufficient to cover consumer welfare and competitive prices, which I know is the goal of His Honor, Mr. President.
Senator Win.